I think you're listening. So we have Nancy Chavetta here. Chavetta is correct pronunciation?
Page 17.
And Nancy is going to go over the budget for the Shellfish Department with us, and she also has given us a memo that probably none of us had a chance to read yet, so. Do you want to just go over, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can say that I have two different line items in my budget. One is 179, which is like the general administration, personnel and operating expenses.
Okay.
And then 180 is the shellfish conservation and propagation.
Right.
So I left shellfish conservation and propagation the same as last year. I already have that entire, this year's entire budget has already been allocated, and so I know that they're just trying to do one thing at a time, I guess. So
Yeah.
propagation is staying the same, and this year we decided that given a lot of the new state requirements for monitoring, given new regulations and the very painstaking kind of oversight in the summertime especially that the Vibrio regulations require. And the fact that this year we actually got behind on some of our work because we were balancing propagation and our monitoring and enforcement work. We, as a team, we decided that we would add so we had the seasonal part-time last year, so we moved seasonal full-time this year as a proposal to make sure that we have adequate coverage for all the different things that go on, especially in that May to October time period, which is when the Vibrio regulations are in effect. And in fact, the position is it coincides exactly with the Vibrio management, so that we have an extra hand on deck. That's also the time when most of the propagation is going on. John Mankiewicz, the assistant constable, has been promoted. He's now full-time on propagation. So we really don't see him on patrol except for on Saturdays. So he's constantly at the propagation bed working and working on what needs to happen with raising the shellfish. So that was one of the things that brought up budget number 179. And the other, which wasn't in my original budget, but it was approved by the selectmen, and that's an extra $1,100. And this is so we've moved to a new system called Sticker Tracker, and because of some of the lessons learned about communicating with people when we had like closures, for example, if there was too much rain or there was some sort of a closure that happened and people weren't supposed to be fishing, as a town, we really didn't have any way to communicate with them.
Okay.
So we are now collecting email addresses, cell phone numbers, and it's added more responsibilities to the beach department. The beach department sells most of the bulk of the stickers in the summertime.
Okay.
So Suzanne and I got together. Suzanne suggested that we just give a couple extra dollars an hour to the person. They would assign one person. That way there'd be less errors in our database and more consistent data entry. So that's that $1,100 for the beach sticker season, which runs about the middle of June to Labor Day.
And what line item is that in?
That is an A2. Both of the increases. So if you look at fiscal year 2019 budget 6164, that was our part-time seasonal, and then it's gone up. I suggested 18, so that's an additional 12,000 more or less to bring this person from 16 to 40 hours a week. And then the Board of Selectmen budget is 19,460. That includes that extra $1,100 for the beach department person.
Okay.
So that's the big changes there.
All right.
going down here, the two main things were B2, repair and maintenance services, because we are getting a new barge, and so that means that we will now be taking it out of the water and putting it in the water every year, so that's $500 each time from Bay Sales Marine, and then we will be winterizing those two motors at a cost of $500 each every year. So that's an additional $2,000 in B2. And then in B3, the Board of Selectmen approved an additional $750 to clean our office. Our office is not a town building, it's a Marina Enterprise building. And we pay rent to the Marina Enterprise, but we don't, the harbor masters clean the public bathrooms, but they don't come and clean our bathroom. And we keep saying we're gonna do it, we don't, because we're busy and it just have other ways to spend our time. So we thought that we would just add in $75 a month for the 10 months out of the year when the beach department the beach department has it cleaned in the summertime.
Okay.
So I added that
Can I
into my
just
budget.
interrupt for a sec on that?
Mm-hmm.
Or Dan, maybe you could answer this. Why, I mean, the service is needed, but can it be part of a different budget though? I mean, you say that we have people who clean the bathrooms at the harbor, and that person can't do it
It's
through
it's the actual harbor master.
Yeah.
So
the.
yeah, I'm not
Oh,
gonna
this is-
ask.
yeah.
He's cleaning toilets?
Yeah, in his own building.
For the public, he does the public
Public
restrooms.
That's,
Yeah.
that is good of him.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I assume this is in fact an outside contractor that comes
Yeah.
in, yeah, which is probably the least expensive way to do it.
Then I think, let me just look, I think that's basically it. Most of the other things that I did was move things around within my budget, but let me just double check.
Can I just ask something while you're checking? So
Yeah.
what's the percentage of moving from 215,873 to 241,673? Anybody who?
I was gonna ask that question.
I'm sorry,
No,
I didn't
good,
take it out of
'cause I
here.
didn't-
I'm just asking the percentage because I
Yeah,
can't do
it's-
that in my head.
Me
So
neither.
I'm sorry.
Dan, you can. What's the
215.
What's the
percentage?
Don't have it in
percentage
his head
increase
right
in your
now.
budget?
No, I can't. So
Tell him up.
I could do it on my phone if you want.
Yeah.
I can't even do it on my.
I'm sorry.
Take me up tonight. Nobody?
Hang on.
Getting there.
Yep.
Okay.
He's doing longhand.
Well.
Oh my God, I haven't seen that equation in like ages.
Roughly 0.9.
It's 80 something, yeah.
Yeah, 0.89 is what I got.
0.89, so that's close to a 9% increase. So I guess my question, and you know, you've seen, Nancy, you've seen Bob is sort of our resident
Yes.
expert.
Yeah.
And you know, so you're far more familiar with his point of view. So he's not here. I hope he's doing well. But so I guess I would ask the question that he's asking, that he's been asking, and that is, well, first of all, where is this going? What's your overall, your budget has been going up, and what's the overall goal? Where do you see the department going? How does that fit in with the selectmen's goals of what's going on here? This is one department that is sort of subsidizing one section of the workforce in town. So I just want to know what the overriding thought is on what's going on with a 9% increase this year.
Okay, I think this is a good time to kind of elevate out, because really there's no other big changes. I just moved things around by line item. This department has, through nobody's fault, has been underfunded and overlooked for many years. And when I took this job, it was very apparent from some of the local comprehensive planning meetings that I had gone to, that they wanted the constituents and the town wanted a fully functioning shellfish department. And so, you know, as I put in time, I'm learning more and more And, you know, these are the things that it's gonna take to have a fully functioning shellfish department. And when I look at, you know, what we're doing, we're taking small steps because coming from, you know, like a $22,000 propagation budget and doubling it, and we did amazingly well and put hundreds of thousands of oysters into the harbor and planted hundreds of thousands of clams, which we'll count on in the future. But that's still just a step. So when I looked back through the monthly report or the annual reports that were done by this department a decade ago, they were growing 1 million oysters and 1 million clams. And so I have, as kind of an interim, longer-term goal, set those as my goals. I would like to be able to grow 1 million oysters and 1 million clams. And that's kind of what I put in that visioning memo. And I think one of the ways that I'm looking to do exactly what Bobby said, which is he thinks, and he said this at the Shellfish Advisory Board meeting at the select board meeting, you know, he really feels like a lot of our work should be covered by the people who are making their living. Now, that's 15% of our population. It is our biggest year-round industry.
Except I think for the town government.
I think that there's more people employed in the industry, and I've spoken to Rosemary about updating our bond document, because there's more people employed by shellfishing than by the town. So, you know, this is we are a significant department for the livelihood year-round of this town. And our job is to make sure that we provide a sustainable living for people and sustainable shellfish resources moving forward.
Why is the town's responsibility to provide a sustainable living?
I think that it is our job to make sure that if this is a public domain that we're in charge of, it's not the state, it's not the feds, the town is in charge. We sell permits. We sell licenses for aquaculture. So there is a certain amount of responsibility with that, in that we have control over the public resource. So first and foremost, we have to have sustainable oysters and clams in our harbor, right? And then from that, if we're allowing extraction, then we have to make sure that we're taking care of also the inputs. So in a way, yes, we have some responsibility because we're managing a public resource. But I agree, and Dan and I have been talking really since I started about getting a revolving fund going. And a revolving fund means that certain percentage of the income, the revenue generated by the work, the permit sales, the license sales, anything else that we decide to do in the future, that would be a revenue generator. That goes into the shellfish fund. A percentage would come into a revolving fund that could only be spent for propagation. All of the other top producing shellfish towns, at least on the Cape that I know, are doing this. And it's a way to take the burden off of the taxpayers. So yes, the town loses some of the revenue generated, right? Because you're used to going in, or we're used to going into the shellfish fund to fund the general operating budget. However, you then fund the propagation budget anyway. So what I'm trying to do is to streamline it, because as those demands grow, I will be able to pull from a place that's not gonna ask, always coming back to the town, increase. Now, this is for propagation, it's not for administration.
Okay, just a question about propagation. If you keep increasing propagation year by year, you're going to drive down the cost of the product. So do you, and as we were talking about earlier at a previous meeting, the price is really low right now. So my question is, I mean, I'm not talking about you, I know you can't control the price on the market, but are you increasing propagation every year, or are you looking at the market and are you being flexible and saying, whoa, nature's really good this year, has been for a while, maybe we don't have to do that, and even if the money is there, maybe we can save that money and do something else with it that we can meet expenses of the department. But it just seems to me that it's this engine of increasing propagation is a dangerous way to go if we can't be flexible about it. That seems to me, I'm not a,
Can I comment on that? Just, there's some interesting things that I wanted to, what is the tipping point in terms of how much product should be out there from an economic standpoint? Also in terms of video management, I think the episode that happened here a while ago was due to the fact that there was an overcrowding of product.
Mm.
So does that?
No, that's not accurate. We had
No.
norovirus, which
Okay.
is a highly communicable. It was a virus. It wasn't from overcrowding. It was
But with
they-
video management or Vivio, isn't
Vibrio.
Vibrio.
Yeah. Mhm.
Isn't that one of the side effects of overcrowding?
No,
No.
it
Okay.
has to do with
Water temperature.
yeah.
Temperature.
Yeah.
But again, as Ira's pointing out, and I'd like to know too, what is the balance? Because if you just keep producing more and more each year, we're gonna have more and more out there,
True.
which means the value of the oysters going out is gonna be lowered, and the people that are gonna try to make a living off of it are not gonna be able to, so they're gonna have to seek a different industry.
So I think it's impossible to predict Mother Nature and
Mhm.
markets, and we have to plan for the worst at all times.
Mhm.
Because you can't just assume that it's going to be good or bad. When we plant in July. Who knows what's going to happen in the fall? Right now, actually, with all that ice in the harbor and it being closed for the past 3 days, the markets will be crying for oysters as soon as usually that's what happens. When when the supply goes away, then the demand increases. This is a big topic of conversation that's going on regionally and nationally about developing new markets. Nobody liked the fact that we had an oversupply this fall. And to a certain extent, my understanding is that it does happen in the fall every year. And this year seemed to be a bit worse. We can't, I don't think, make decisions based on what ifs. We have to plan, and our strategy is not to do all one thing. Like we're going to do, we do some oysters, we do some clams, we bring in some of the relay quahogs, the ones that are kind of ready to go out. We got a lot of donations this year. We're trying to have a multi-pronged effort so that it's never relying on one thing, but I do think that there is room for bringing this harbor back to what it was in terms of a wild fishery. We have, it looks like perhaps a dozen boats fishing out of this harbor. When I started in 2017, there were 2, maybe 3 in the summer. So people are getting into this because there is a demand. There are forces at work. There is the state of Massachusetts and the state of Washington are now the only 2 states in the country that are going to be allowed to export to Europe. There is a growing Chinese market. This is beyond the scope of what I do, but I do pay attention to this stuff, and I did just go to an aquaculture conference in Boston where they talked a lot about this. And yeah, I think to a certain extent, there will be some flexibility, but it's a big harbor, and we've done one little area of propagating this year, and it's a big harbor we have to take care of. And I think over time we'll understand the fluctuations of the market a little better, but I don't think it's ever predictable. So I guess I would love to be as flexible as we can be, but I don't want to do it at the expense of not having a propagation budget or like limiting ourselves. I really am looking at other towns that are doing this. I mean, oysters are in the middle of a renaissance right now, but clams are getting a great price too. So we've got to get our clams out there as well.
Can I just ask you,
Yeah.
you mentioned other towns, because that was one of the other questions I was going to ask you. in terms of how does this budget compare to other towns?
So, I did that as part of the revolving fund, let me just see where I have
Okay,
that.
so when you're saying revolving fund, are you talking, the Shellfish Department does not currently have an enterprise fund. So what is this revolving fund? you're
So a
talking about?
revolving fund, Dan might be able to
She talks
explain it
about it
better, but
in-
it's
Yeah.
just, you can only
The
spend,
Second to last paragraph.
you create it, and it is a separate fund that has specified uses. So it would be
So
used
town
only by
meeting would
this.
have to approve us having a
Okay,
revolving fund
good,
for
that's my
Shellfish.
point.
So
Is
we
that-
don't have
So
one
you
right
wanna
now.
create-
Brought in
that's
to
good. Is it in
show us
there?
today the
I
article.
did,
If
but
it's in
I
there,
just,
it's
I
all-
haven't really done it with
Right.
Dan yet. So I
Yeah.
think I'd rather talk about it instead of handing stuff out, just because I'd rather have Dan and I powwow on it
Okay,
first.
so that's having to do with creating this fund, is that what that article is?
Yeah, so
so
that's
that's-
what that, so I have written a memo draft for you and for the Board of Selectmen. I have compared wild and aquaculture landings with the top producing towns in the state, and then propagation budget. So Wellfleet is number 1 for wild oysters. It's number 4 for wild quahogs in the state. We are 3rd for farmed oysters, and we're 1st for farmed quahogs. So we're a strong town.
Of how many towns?
Well, in the state of Massachusetts, so all the coastal communities. I mean, yeah.
They
there's-
all have aquaculture?
They all would, they have either aquaculture, I don't know, aquaculture and wild fisheries.
Okay.
I have more complete data, and if that's more interesting to you, like I have the top 10, and I have it going back to like 2012
I don't know.
or
That
something.
might be
That might be too much.
information,
But
it's
anyway,
definitely- Definitely
So-
something worth showing in some format in terms of how does this compare to other towns' budgets.
Right, so this is what, I
landings-
wanted to give you the
landing
context
space.
of where we fall. Falmouth has a $62,500 propagation budget. Chatham has a $50,000 propagation budget. From there, these all have revolving funds.
Right.
So Chatham actually takes in probably 100,000, but they don't use it every year, and they save it for other things like science, or they had to defend Monomoy. They're in litigation, I think, for shellfishing in Monomoy. So
With the federal government, right?
yes,
Yeah.
so it's a fund that can be used for those things, and what the constable tells me is it costs them about $50,000 a year, and then Barnstable has at least 100,000 that they get from their general fund, plus they have their own revolving fund, which they call an S fund, and that last year brought in, I want to say, 132,000. So they have maybe 232 that they could pull from. And we last year were 22,000, and this year I put it to 46. So I do feel like I'm taking small steps, but I do want to continue to be competitive with our neighbors, right? I want us to.
Does that have anything about land mass or area of covering for each town?
No,
compared
that's a
to-
good,
'cause
that's a
that's
good, I
something-
think we have 2,400 acres of estuaries, but I'll look that up.
Mhm.
So I'll look at, you want to know how many acres?
I'm
of
just
coast-
thinking in terms of appeal to the town meeting,
Yeah,
whether I support you or not, I haven't made a decision, but that kind of information, short and sweet, gives them a comparison.
yeah.
May I ask another question?
You may.
Okay, Nancy, Bob suggests permit fees, grant fees, getting the fishermen to help themselves by aiding the department. What about permit fees, grant fees? The reason what worries me is, and I don't see it being any other way, is that the Shellfish Advisory Committee is made up all of mostly of shellfish people. So, of course, there's and I can't see anybody else knowing enough to be on the Shellfish Advisory Committee. However, there's kind of a built-in conflict of interest. So I'm wondering how we can see that so that people think that it's fair.
It's an advisory board. She doesn't have a phone.
No, of course not. But I'm saying that
Like us.
they will advise.
Yes.
Yeah, but
So
they
are you
advise town
concerned
meeting.
that they
Right.
won't raise their own fees?
Well, that's a question, yes.
Okay, so in 2017, they did raise fees.
Okay.
This year, we were gonna they
Mhm.
were advising the select board to raise fees again. Then I also presented the idea of a revolving fund, and they said, okay, why don't we hold off and do it because people don't mind. Some people
Some
don't mind, I'm not gonna
sure.
speak for everybody.
Sure.
But if they knew that that the increase in fee was going to help fund propagation, which was going to help them,
Right.
when they're out in the wild, I think it's more palatable, right? So increasing of permit fees will probably happen down the road. I think that both commercial and recreational people should expect that they will have some investment, that part of their fee is going to go for propagation, so it's a big happy circle. And then the other thing that Bob brought up at the select board meeting, and something that, of course, constables all over the Commonwealth are talking about, is increasing, so the Mass General Law states that the amount that you're allowed to charge per acre for shellfish license fee is $25 per person named to the grant. So, people would love to increase that. 2 towns have petitioned and gotten what's called a home rule petition, and they're allowed to charge up to $200. So Bobby brought that up. Maybe we should be able to increase the cost per acre. Sure, we'll look at anything. It's certainly something that people are talking about. But I think when you look at the wild fishery, if I'm putting something into it, then I know I'm going to get something out of it. So I think over time, yes, those will increase a bit. And the other thing is, when I was looking back through those reports, they talked about 200 people at Indian Neck on July 4th weekend harvesting. I mean, I think our biggest day last year might have been 60 or 80 people. I have it written. I can look back at it, but we're a far cry from what we used to have here, even for recreational fishermen, and Indian Neck is in great shape. Like, nobody's complaining, but we sell about 850 permits a year, and other towns sell 1,000, 2,000. So we can also increase what we offer to our visitors and residents on the recreational, and all year long. Chipman's Cove is recreational. Almost the whole harbor is also open to rec people. It's just in the summertime that it's confined to Indian Neck for Wednesdays and Sundays. So I do think we have time to, we have a way of expanding in many different options.
Can I jump on that? Because I had a question actually about the permits, and in your memo. And thank you, it was very concise and well thought out, and thanks for being here on the hot seat today. I know you're kind of getting grilled. The increase in permits, and that's what I was gonna ask, because propagation and increasing the product that has effects on the, you're talking to a bunch of finance people, not a bunch of, fisher people. So, increasing 20 meaningful commercial licenses, are there, and my question is, do we cap out permits in the shellfish department? And if not, and you want to increase those sales, do you have a plan, or do you have an outlook on what that looks like to increase the sales of the permits?
Like if we got 20 more, what would that mean to our bottom line of intake?
No, I don't necessarily mean dollars and cents, but I mean, here we have, we have 9 boats out there now, and then the goal is to have at least 20 meaningful commercial fisher licenses. And then to increase, you just said, we had how many people versus 200 in the heyday.
Right.
What does that look like to increase there? Is there room to increase that? Are there people banging the doors down saying we want permits, but we don't limit those? So, I mean, that was not very clear.
We don't limit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's room for us, certainly. I think there's room for growth here, because this department has not been doing a lot lately.
Okay.
So I'd have to go back and look over how many people used to have permits. I don't know, so I'd have to do some research on that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's room for growth here, and obviously it will contribute to the bottom line, but I think that one hand will wash the other, if you will. And I will say that this year, although our numbers seem to be kind of along the same lines right now, I think we've sold about 140. So we only sell commercial permits in December and January. You have to be a domiciled resident, so we expect you to be here to be able to get that. And I just looked, we sold just over 140 permits so far. But there's a lot of new people this year from previous years. So that's encouraging to me. A lot of young people in their 20s, 30s, a lot of wives I've seen come or girlfriends this year. So it's new people. And I think that, you know, there's been a lot of focus on the Shellfish Department since I started, and even the whole interviewing process was a very public process. And I think people are starting to pay attention and hearing good feedback about the efforts that we're making, and it's getting people excited.
So you're saying there are more full-time young people who are looking to the harbor to try to make a living? Well, that's a wonderful thing.
That is.
It is.
Actually, your information is in your, you said you sold 157 commercial permits last year.
Yeah, that's it, that is.
And then 134 individual grant leases last year. So I think if you're hoping to grow that, like, are you you want to know like how much of a projection of growth?
I
And
mean,
how
I
that would equate to
think it's the
revenue?
third leg, for me, it's the third leg to the stool. It's propagation, so we're making more of these, and we'd like to increase the budget to increase the production, but when you increase the production, we also need to have people that are coming in to
I think
produce
that's
and
what I-
harvest, and
You're increasing
also,
revenue.
so it's my last, it's my kind of
Well,
that,
that's sort of what I meant when I say, what's the goal?
yeah.
And that's a good goal. But if we don't know what the goal is, just throwing money into propagation doesn't cut it, because just more oysters, because that just means well,
commercial, yeah.
yeah, well, some people will just take their boat along another, do a couple more passes, and a couple of people will make more money. But I think it's really important that a lot of people share in the resource.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
that's a great goal.
That's our goal, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we really want, especially because, you know, there's plenty of jobs here in the summertime. In fact, we are busier out there on the flats in the winter. And to me, that's great. You can just tell that in the wintertime, there's a significant portion of people's income annually that is made in the winter on the flats in Wellfleet. And I think that's really important, because we have to be creative here to make it work.
So Nancy, I got a question, and I'm going to put my complete ignorance about this industry on display. In your memo, you say you want to propagate 1 million oysters, 1 million coho clams for commercial and recreational fisheries. I'm assuming by recreational we mean people who buy the licenses, go out and take the clam, the clam
Just for
breaks
their
and
own
whatever,
use.
for their own use.
Yes.
And to what degree that competes with the existing industry, we could have a long conversation.
Not
If
at
they're-
all.
Well, I mean, if I'm bringing my own oysters home, I don't go out and buy someone else's, just that. But I'm not clear what the connection is to the commercial industry. I always thought that the people who have their permits and their beds are doing their own propagation, and they are responsible for their own oysters. What's the commercial benefit to us propagating, say, 1 million oysters? Do they get any access?
There
So-
are other commercial fishermen who fish the wild fishery. They don't have a grant.
So there's three
Those are
different
boats that are branding and that
categories.
sort of thing?
But also people,
There's
yes.
three categories, Fred. So there's your recreational harvesters.
Right.
There are your wild harvesters who go out and pick oysters or dig clams in the estuaries. And then there are your grant leaseholders. So these are people who pay the town for use of the bottom, and they run their farming operation on that. And they are they buy their own seed. We do allow leaseholders to put Chinese hats, so spat collecting devices, in Chipman's Cove in the summer when it's closed. and they have to have a commercial fishing permit, but then they can fish for wild oysters in Chipman's Cove, and so the spats settle on these hats, and then they get
Spat in the
seed.
hat, I think I read that.
Spat in the hat. So then they get, free seed. It's
So-
seed collected in the wild, so that's something that we allow leaseholders to do, but everything, their whole operations, they buy their own seed or collect their own seed and raise them and sell them all in there.
So one follow-on question then. My understanding is that one of the values of having your own grant and cultivating your own oysters is that you get more perfect oysters, rounder oysters, more uniform oysters that
More marketable.
The-
more marketable.
Yeah, more desirable in the market.
Are we by doing a tenfold increase in propagation that would be available to the wild fishermen competing in any way with the people who are out there in the flats doing their own thing? Are we, by giving them access to say 10 times the number of oysters they currently have, are we,
So
are
there
we
is
having, are
actually.
we creating competition in the market?
So,
for the commercial people?
Wellfleet Spat has done a lot of market research on this and presented it. It was, it's pretty clear that wild Wellfleet oysters have their own pull in the market, separate from aquaculturally raised. And we're lucky like that because we have a name. We've been doing this for, hundreds of years. And so it's very well known. So the wild Wellfleet oyster actually has its own kind of pull.
It's a niche.
It is. So I
Yeah.
think that, and
Yeah.
they might not be perfect, right? But there are fishermen out there that they're known, they have their markets and they're only gonna pick a select oyster. Like a select oyster that looks, even from the wild, they might get less. They might not get their full bushel, but that's what they do. Everybody works differently. And sometimes the wild stuff is a little different looking from the perfectly groomed farm raised, but it has its own pull.
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to understand. I see what the increase in the budget would be, and what you say at the bottom here. Just looking at the numbers that we are currently bringing in from the existing permits, it's not a huge amount of money. We talked about that earlier. It's not like we're talking about millions of dollars here
Yeah.
in increased revenue from permits, for example, right? So it looks like you'd be better than break even for sure if you get. I just want to make sure we're not undermining a core value of the town by giving the town the opportunity to.
It sounds like
To
you've
do
done your
this.
research on that, though.
So are you talking about starting the revolving fund?
No, I mean,
No.
just in general, that we're not creating,
Increasing production.
increasing
That's what
production
you're worried
and
about.
undermining
Undermining the
the,
competition.
the earning
Too much product.
ability of
I mean,
existing.
you're not creating a situation where the bottom's
Yeah.
gonna fall out of the market.
Right. Well, I mean, there is some flexibility. I mean, every year we would come forward, and if we have a couple of years where it's just horrible, then we're gonna learn a lesson there.
But the
Would the existing fishermen have any input into this process at all? I mean, the
Well, I mean, I
existing
present
current
this budget at Shellfish Advisory, so there's all sorts of, and then here, and then the select board, and, there's definitely ways for people to chime in.
But the aquaculture community is not upset about increasing propagation.
I do not hear that. I do not hear that out at all. I hear that we're doing a great job. People are really happy.
Increase, again, it's not a lot of money. Increasing propagation will increase the resource and more people can, if they wish, take advantage of our harbor. And the risk is whether or not we're flooding the market, but I don't know if that's,
And I just want to get a little bit more specific. So flooding the market happens, to the best of my knowledge, and I am still new, in the fall. Like right now, a lot of aquaculture operations are shut down for the winter. Those oysters, some people leave some out on their beds. A lot of people pit the smaller stuff. And this is not happening just in Wellfleet, it's happening across the board up and down the seaboard. So right now, with the harbor iced over, nobody can get product. But when that opens, there'll be demand. So the winter time is actually a time when oysters and there's a demand for shellfish, and you get a good price for it. So there's grant holders who have taken all their stuff in that get wild permits. So you have grant leaseholders that normally would be
Paying for a second
farming,
permit.
but now January, February, March, they might do little stuff, but they're out there on the flats. Because that way it allows them to go to market and make some extra money while their stuff is either under ice or,
And you're not looking at, I mean, this is a one-time increase for several years of neglect, if you will, and you don't see this kind of growth continuing, so.
well, in terms of propagation, what I'd like to do is just take it out of this budgeting process.
Yeah.
So that if we, any ebbs and flows we can just do, and I think that there is some flexibility there, and we will learn lessons along the way, for sure. But this, last year I really focused on propagation. This year I'm focusing on the revolving fund, but I'm also trying to get the department infrastructure to be in a solid space, right? And I'm just gonna, the other thing that is not in this budget, but I put forth 2 capital plan ideas. One that the town administrator included and one that he did not. So the one that was approved were 2 motors for the new barge. We are gonna limp along with the ones that we have until we can, but they weren't included in the budget, just the barge was. So we've got those, and town administrator has approved that. The other thing is that now that we've added on propagation, we actually need a 3rd truck. I know Bobby thinks that the ATV on a trailer, but that's kind of like an ancillary helper. We're talking about we need a truck to be able to transport equipment, transport oysters, get things out to our propagation bed, back and forth, back and forth. And then in the summertime, you need a north and south patrol because the exposure times are so short that you have to divide and conquer because we have so many estuaries open. So we do in the summertime need 3 trucks, and often we have a brand new truck and it had 2 different recalls this year. I took my little blue bug on patrol. Well, it's not my idea, to take that low little car, even though you can't go onto the beach, so you can't patrol the beach from your own vehicle, and even some of the dirt roads. It's just, I'm getting in from Chipman's Cove, I'm in the mud up to here, and then I'm getting in my car. So I do feel like we need a truck. I'm going to present that to you. The select board, I believe, did approve that, but it's something that will go as a separate item at town meeting. So I'll want you to weigh in on that too, and I'll have to get up and present it. But this is I'm looking at the infrastructure of the department overall. It has been overlooked. I'm not looking backwards. I'm just trying to learn as I go and create a department that's functioning and serving the population.
And it is an important part of our community.
It is.
Can I ask
have
a question?
I'm sorry.
Have you any thought been given to approach SPAT? Because they do have, and it's public knowledge, a fairly nice little kitty of cash. And the whole reason why they're existing, not the whole reason, the planning is fabulous, don't get me wrong on that, but, the event is celebrating the Wellfleet oyster. And it would be nice if they did kick more money back than just paying the overtime of the permits. It also would give a feel-good feeling for those who are attending the festival, knowing that a portion of what they're paying and why they're coming here is going back into the propagation fund.
So I obviously, I got a lot. I should do better publicity about this, but last year I applied to SPAT for a $12,000 grant, which they gave us, and we bought seed. We used half of it this year, and we'll use half of it in the spring. So they gave us $12,000. I bought 100,000 oysters in August, and then I have them, their money is gonna go into the seed purchase for this year. In addition, just last night, I sent them another proposal, which the board will be distributed to the board on Friday. And this was a heftier ask. And let me just back up, because they also gave $10,000 to the town to start a dredging maintenance fund, which every shellfishman could be appreciative of, every boater. But so I just put kind of a heftier proposal in front of them. The barge that we got, is, and this was, some of these things came to light after this kind of budgeting process. So we have this great barge, it had a price, but then there's things that I didn't know would be needed, like a Coast Guard safety kit, an anchor, a large anchor. There's all sorts of these extra little things that we're gonna need. So we kind of did a little bit of back of the envelope calculations. So there's $5,000 that I'm asking for SPAT for that. I'm asking them to help increase our seed purchase, because we are already doing what we did last year and we're able to do more. We recognize that, so we're gonna try and do more. They could help fund that. I'm asking for some more money to get some of the infrastructure, so the racks and bags that we need to set up our farm. And
So
so,
far this
I
year-
probably have, it's probably, I don't, it's
So you have a commitment this year?
$30-something thousand I just asked them
$30,000
for. And,
Okay.
I separated it out so that they could also feel free to pick a menu
Right.
of things that they might want or not want to support. But I know that their goal is to support the shellfish industry, and they have been wanting for a long time a partnership with the town and the shellfish department. And so I've been trying really hard to think about meaningful ways to turn that into action.
So if they're gonna give you 30,000,
If,
if they do,
yeah,
then there's just an observation on my part. I would just say, apply to propagation, then your request to town meeting will only be 16,000.
no,
Or.
this is additional. This is additional
this is-
stuff.
yeah.
Like I have in my budget what I need for my bare minimum,
Mhm.
but this is gonna fill in some gaps. I don't have extra. I didn't want to increase my propagation budget because I already asked last year. This year I wanted to focus on the operating budget and the infrastructure of the department. I can't do it all at once. I'm trying to be creative here, not come back to the town and ask for more. And SPAT wants to help, and they have proved themselves good partners. So I'm hoping to do that with them and take it off of the taxpayers. There's nothing coming out of this budget with the SPAT. This is all additional that we can do better. And the truck isn't either, because SPAT's not gonna buy the town a truck. I mean, that's a normal
Could I ask you something
capital
about the truck?
expense.
Can I just ask about the truck?
You wanna
And
drive it?
pardon me?
You wanna drive it?
I have one already. I don't want to drive another one. And I guess this question is actually as much for Dan, and that is that, it's an obvious thing that they're going to take a truck, drive it in the mud. So do we have an older truck, somebody else need a truck, and can we switch over another truck to the shellfish department? I mean,
Because
I
the,
talked to Mark about that.
yeah, so
I
in
talked
other
to
words,
Mark.
but there's an overall, but Dan, as
Yeah.
the TA, you oversee all the
We
trucks.
usually try to do that whenever
Yeah.
possible.
So
The
that's my
one
question.
thing about the shellfish department, I will say, is they are harder on their
Right.
vehicles.
they're
than
the
any
final
other
resting
department.
place of the truck.
So if you take an older DPW truck and you put it on the flats, it's not gonna last very long. It's,
And we
Yeah.
don't change over and the DPW trucks can't keep up with that in their cycle, and nor do we want them to, I think.
it's just, and this kills me, because you buy a truck and maybe it's gonna last you 5 years out on the flats, just because of the salt water they use, and they wash them down every time they get done using them, but it's just, they really take a beating being out there.
Maybe we're missing a revenue opportunity. They could be like those target ships from World War II, just leave them out on
You
the
put 'em on
flat.
reefs.
Yeah, somebody has to
Sunken
take the gas, the whole fuel and exhaust system out of them.
Oh, you're taking me seriously.
I'm just saying,
And I
It
do
is
want to
it's an extra
say,
expense.
just a little bit more about the truck. So I spoke with Mark and went over this, like what is the best? This is also his suggestion. Dan said, why don't you check around and see what other towns are doing? So other towns are on a 5-year plan as well. It's just what it is. And
And these are brand new.
So this is the
Well, we have a
opportunity to start out with a
2016,
brand
we have
new
a
truck. It'll
2018.
be
I mean,
part
what
of
you're
the 5-year
proposing is
rollover.
to buy brand new vehicles, not
Because
to
in the
purchase a
past, it's
vehicle
just been
that's off
handing
lease
stuff
or
around.
anything.
right, it's
used.
purchasing.
makes
So
sense.
last year in the budget, I had,
Didn't
we had
expect-
budgeted,
As long
I
as
think,
it's
$25,000. And I don't remember exactly how much we budgeted, but at the last, like, right before July 1, we were out of truck. We were down to one truck going into the summer season. So I sent an email out to every dealership in the area, and I actually was able to save the town almost $3,000. So, and we got our truck as soon as, fiscal year 19 budget hit, we got our truck.
So you say truck, what kind of truck are we talking about?
It's a F-150, it's a Ford F-150.
Oh, okay,
So we have a
it's like a big
2016.
pickup truck.
Yeah, we have a 2016, we have a 2018, and if all goes well, we'll have a 2020.
And
So
that's
they'll be on
a
2-year.
$30,000 truck, something like that? A little more?
This year they quoted me 26, but I'll do the same thing, and if I can save a few $1,000s, I will. We're not doing a trade-in this year because we need the third truck.
This is a bare bones, this doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, manual, everything is manual
Right.
because you don't want
Right, you
anything
don't want
to.
electronics.
Right.
filtered
So if
too.
you're revolving through 3 trucks, say, about every 2 years you would need to get a new.
Well, they're on a
Each one has
5-year
about
plan.
Right, so let's say
So
you have a
in-
couple and you
yeah.
buy a new one now, one's
And
gonna
then-
be
and
dead
then-
in 2 years,
Yeah,
another
so
one will be
then-
dead.
And that way we
thereafter.
think we might get some trade-in value for them, but we'll see.
Yeah.
There might be a little trade-in value. We did get a trade-in on the last truck that we traded in. I think we got, I can't remember, $2,000 or $3,000 back.
Yeah, that's about what you
So-
said.
Low mileage.
They
Low
are.
the low mileage. You can hose that.
So I want to
Nancy?
give you an idea about the revolving fund, just a little bit of information on it. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you, the Board of Selectmen, and then town meeting to approve having a revolving fund for Shellfish. Then Nancy and I have talked, as we start to increase fees, we'll put that increase of fees into the revolving fund. Our ultimate goal eventually is that the revolving fund would completely pay for propagation. So we're looking to try and take us in that direction.
Is there
It'll take
anything
us a little
similar to
while
that?
to get there.
Is there anything similar to that in any other, do you have anything else?
Almost
like
every
that?
other town has that.
What's the
Yeah.
difference between a revolving fund and an enterprise fund?
So a revolving fund is, in a sense, what one of Ira's first questions ties into what it is. A revolving fund is the money comes in, it goes into the fund, and it's specified by town meeting vote what it can be used for. When it is to be used for propagation, the Shellfish Constable would not have to go back to town meeting and ask for approval to expend that money. So when you approve it, you would say revenues and expenses not to exceed, say, $20,000 per year. So that's the most that can be spent out of that revolving fund. An enterprise fund is just like a separate self-sustaining business.
I would just say, and you and I still have to work it out, but I would say that starting with permit sales for 2020, we would, that's when it would happen, whether or not we increase. But I would say that the revenue that starts to be generated on December 1 of this year, which is the new year.
And then at that point, if we say we're gonna take in $10,000 for the revolving fund, then we can have 10,000 less budgeted in propagation.
That's right.
On the budget.
Yep.
So we'll start to pay for propagation out of the revolving fund.
Instead of out of the
Instead of
taxpayer,
out of- yeah.
instead of out of our general budget.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Can I ask one quick question, because it's gonna be, as soon as you guys hear it, you're all gonna make a sigh. But if you could sum up in 2 or 3 sentences, dredging impact on
Thank you, I was gonna
voice
say.
on seed or propagation that's already out there. If you are propagating in an area that needs to have maintenance through the dredging process, is this the correct time to begin this project?
So
She gets-
we're never gonna
she
put
gets the question of the
shellfish,
night.
we're never gonna put shellfish where we think that they would be in danger of being smothered. We don't. We put them in areas that we know are
Protected.
yeah, but
So you don't see any adverse effect from
Dredging.
a dredging project or
No.
minimal adverse?
no, I mean, we have lots of ideas what to do before dredging to make sure that none of our shellfish resources that might be out there would be wasted.
Okay, that's,
Good to know.
Yeah,
Maybe
like
besides the channel.
dragging letting some of the boats drag the channel before the channel gets dredged. 'Cause let's get
so you
our
might as well
shellfish
take them out and
first,
harvest
right.
them before they're
Right, we
gone.
don't
Yeah,
allow
okay.
it now, but you would do it as a special procedure for a certain amount of time or a certain permit, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a quick question that I don't think will elicit a gasp of any kind. Wellfleet shellfish sales represent 6.3 million of economic impact. What went into the 6.3 million? How was that number derived?
Hold on one second, let me tell you.
See, mine was easy.
6.3 is just oysters, clams. You know what, I'm not sure, it might also be blood clams,
That's
and
a
it might
small
be
percentage,
bay
but-
scallops too.
So these are consumed, like the restaurants are selling that people are, I mean, it's everything.
I'll have
that
to check, I'm
involves-
not sure if it's just oyster and clams or if it's all shellfish. I know that we were 8th in the state for seafood landings in 2017, and that was 6.6 million. So I don't know if that's coming from like any striped bass that might be landed here commercially, state sea clam fishery that's landed here. So there's a $300,000 difference in 2017. I just don't know in my head
How much of that is
if
not
it's
seafood and clam
oysters and
landings.
clams or if it's, you know, so we
Scallops,
have about 6 different,
scallops never get seeded,
not yet,
but
but we
you're,
could in the
you
future.
could, you could.
Other towns are, I mean, Chatham does it and Falmouth does it, and I think we probably one day would want to explore it.
I think it's been, hasn't it been investigated at one point,
Here,
I thought so.
it might have been.
It's that seagrass they grow in that doesn't, we don't have enough of that.
Eelgrass.
Right?
Some, it not, I just was at a Mass Shellfish Officers Association meeting, and they are doing a study, the state is actually doing a study. It's not necessarily true that they only grow in seagrass, eelgrass beds.
Eelgrass.
So I'm waiting to see kind of, it's gonna be an ongoing study. The rest, they did it this year, and they'll be doing it next year, and then they'll report out to us.
In Wellfleet Harbor?
It's actually down off of New Bedford, kind of down maybe like the Fairhaven area, I'm forgetting.
Do you have resources in the state to call someone in and check out areas of Wellfleet Harbor for that, for instance?
Oh, for
Just,
where would be a good place?
Mhm.
Or the county, the extension program is
I
amazing,
see.
and they're down here all the time, and
I
they've
see.
done scallop grow out.
I see.
Yeah, so I'd go right to the county. Yep.
So does that mean that
We
we're
worked with
gonna
them.
see in the budget propagation
Well, food scallop.
for scallops?
Might.
Scallops.
What's
Well, that
the-
might be,
That might be the
that might
new-
be very hopeful.
Yeah.
There are
Baby
Wellfleet
baby
scallops.
I certainly wouldn't want to limit the revolving fund to, $10,000 a year. I mean, we're creating it so that we can have some leeway.
That would be great.
I was in Vegas a few years ago and Wellfleet oysters were on the menu at the restaurant.
Yes.
That's when you're gonna take a picture
Did that
and
make you
post
feel
it.
good?
Yes.
And did you stand up and
My
pontificate?
My husband ordered them and said, "There's no sand in these." He almost sent them back.
They're on the menu in London.
Should have brought his own sand. Okay, well, that was pretty complete. Anybody have anything else for Nancy?
Thank you for your passion.
Yes, thank you.
Definitely have,
Definitely.
you know, you say you're new, but you've
It's a little
definitely got
overwhelming part of
a
this.
handle on it.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? So, what happens now? Like, when do you take a vote and I see it on the town warrant? Like, I'm obviously,
Well, here's the thing, it's the selectmen's budget that goes to town.
We would like
But
to have a lot of information about the budget as a whole before we sit there. We don't tend to vote on individual
Gotcha.
departments.
understood.
Because
Yeah.
Because we don't.
We need to take a look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just need a little bit
And
more.
really, yeah,
information.
we tend to put off the voting part until we have a lot more information.
Understood.
So,
But you would, if it's its own article,
yes.
You would
yeah,
for the
individual
truck.
articles will get dealt with after we deal with the budget as a whole.
okay.
So we don't know.
Yeah, the budget first and then the
And then
articles.
When there is an article, we get to respond to it. But
Yeah.
since there is no article yet, there's nothing to vote on.
Right.
Right, okay. This
So-
is totally a procedural question.
Yep, no, that's perfectly legitimate. And we do things a little differently from the select board, so.
Is there anything I should be doing
We'll ask you.
Yeah, if you have additional questions, you will get
Just that
an email
information
from
town
Rebecca.
comparison.
Yeah, so I'm gonna add in, I have
Well, you can
it, I
send
have it
what you
already
have.
done.
Yeah.
But what I should, I'll see if I can find out how many acres of
Acres.
coastal estuaries they patrol.
Yeah, you can send it to Rebecca and she'll distribute it to us at a meeting, or she'll email it or both.
When you present at town meeting, I'd encourage you to share the contributions that SPAT has made.
Yes.
Yeah,
Definitely want
Yeah.
that.
I think that's, it's really just showing, we're all pulling in the same direction.
it's
Plus
so
that you've looked
true.
at other resources.
You also probably want to look into a grant for an ice machine.
Yeah, so I just actually, Michelle sent me every single document that she has on the ice machine, because SPAT had looked into it, and I don't want to just have redundancy.
Right.
So the harbor masters and I are looking into that. And just last night, again, we exchanged emails, so.
I think you're missing a major revenue opportunity here by not having cocktail sauce and beer concessions at the beaches for
Well,
pulling oysters.
Get a
and
lemon
clams in.
dispensing machine?
I will
Yeah.
tell you that people have asked for our gear. People have asked for T-shirts and hats with the Wellfleet Shellfish Department
That's a
logo.
great opportunity.
So I'd
That's
have to
very
talk to the
cool.
beach department.
Yeah, but we don't want to see another employee in charge of.
That's right, sales.
In
yeah,
charge of.
Right.
Yeah. But you know, the beach
No,
department
that's-
sells t-shirts, they could sell
I
those
know,
as well.
but they do a lot more sitting around.
Fred actually has
No,
a
but
very
I'm
good
saying they
idea.
could
I
sell
know.
those
That is a
as
very
Oh,
good
well.
yes.
idea.
Because if you could have somebody just selling shellfish, a permit down at each beach along with whoever else is there. And then a
we're
percentage
going
of
back
what
to
they,
food
percentage
trucks.
what they make
Killing it.
goes back to the town during the summer.
I'm sorry?
Like an
Selling-
oyster bar? No, his idea.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
going back
I
to
don't-
food
I don't
trucks.
think that's-
Alternate revenue.
Stephen, we're going back to food trucks.
No, you don't want food trucks.
All right.
All right,
That's
so
it.
when
This is beyond our charge here.
When
Right.
Dan and I kind of finalize
So
our
we-
ideas for the revolving fund, I will email you and the Board of Selectmen with all of the backup documentation that, I've put
Yeah.
together to date.
Great.
So, thank you.
All
That was
right.
excellent. Thank you so
you.
much, Nancy. Thank
Yeah,
you for
so-
your time.
We may ask you to come back when we look at the article, but if the information's all clear, we probably won't need it.
Okay,
All right.
thanks. I appreciate you guys taking the time to
Thank you very much.
pay attention to us. Thanks. Take care.
Someone's reading your budgets.
All right. So, let's dispense with the other business here. So there was a future planning, just an FYI, there was a future planning for Wellfleet's future meeting this afternoon here. That had a lot of department heads and committee heads. And we mostly discussed planning, basically the need for, the potential need for a full-time planner. Didn't make any decisions, and
Can I ask one
climate
question on
change
that?
in impact. Let
is
me
that
finish,
not-
Ira,
I just-
please.
Okay.
Thank you. So Fred and Jeff were able to attend as well, which was great. As I said, no decisions were made, mostly discussed climate change and whether or not we needed a planner and a few other things. That's being addressed by the new committee that's coming online.
Sort of a new committee.
We have
Yeah.
to do
Dredge committee.
The
the
dredging
dredging
committee, it
thing.
sounds
The
like.
dredging committee.
But that's great.
So can I
Yes, you
follow up
may,
with a
yes.
question? Is our town planner not part of the job of the assistant town
Yes.
It is.
administrator?
That was a point that was made today, yes.
That was
Okay,
discussed,
so-
yes.
But it was posited that we could use a full-time one.
Or possibly a supplement with the,
Or a service that you
supplement with a
purchase.
consultant. There are planning consultants, and then maybe that would be an interim step if we need additional resources.
Part of this came from, they were having a discussion about getting the local comprehensive plan finished and updated.
Right.
And somebody at the time during that discussion said they thought we could use a full-time planner. So it wasn't unanimous, and the people who were sitting around didn't all agree with it, but that's where it came up in that discussion.
There were no votes and no actual
No, I get it,
actions.
I get it.
And there was a reference back to last year's request for the water czar.
Right.
And kind of if you hire somebody but give them all this responsibility and no power, it's a pretty frustrating job.
Well, plus they don't have a job description, so nobody knows what it entails.
Planning.
But
Not
towards
the-
that, I wanted to suggest we
Yeah.
get the water and wastewater committees in here on February 13th for that meeting.
Okay.
Oh, I'm gonna miss that one.
You gonna miss that? No,
You can watch it on TV.
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
on your
I'm sure they get it in Boca.
on your phone, wherever you are.
We Skype you in.
So,
Okay.
all right, so
Okay.
that's all really all I had to say about that. So let's dispense with the minutes and we can do a quick,
I'll move the minute.
I'd move to dispense.
I'll second. Both.
any discussion? All those in favor?
I,
All right, thank you.
I wasn't here. I wasn't here.
That was a great meeting.
It was a great meeting. You can watch it on
Kind
the
of-
website.
Matter of fact,
be very excited.
you're required to watch it. You gotta ask.
Homework.
How are Nielsen ratings?
All right.
You can come over, Ken's watching that.
I know, and I'm the one that said let's do them all in a row.
If I may,
Okay.
Fred, strategic planning, anything to update?
Well, sure. We're sort of in general agreement that the document from last year will be kind of a template for the document this year. So in theory, it's not gonna have a lot of new line items. There are a few that are starting to show up because they're starting to seem a little more real. One that we've become aware of is, for example, the elementary school and the library both may have to look at putting sprinkler systems in, and those could be $500,000 each. And whether those are mandated or not is still to be determined. But stuff like that is starting to pop up here and there. You know, the Kendrick Avenue thing was not in there last year. It could be theoretically still in there. The biggest change seems to me that we were assuming last year that the dredging was going to happen, and now we can't assume anything yet because the feds have not stepped up to their role. So with that uncertainty, a number of towns on the Cape are looking at getting their own dredges and whatever. And I imagine the dredging committee will be looking into sharing whatever. That the cost of dredging is anywhere from 0 to infinity. And the strategy for dredging is anywhere from 0 to infinity. And so we may want to revisit that as the committee starts to do its work. Maybe we can get some detail. But other than that, it's really the same thing. Just everybody who's got a liaison relationship, reach out and just say any major things coming down the pike, you know, that we need to know about. The problem for me, if I'm going to be a scribe on this to any degree, is that I'll be away for part of March and April. So the writing of it, I'd love to have this done by mid-March.
Okay. Well, that's a goal.
And I don't see why it can't be done, because we already have a head start,
They
so.
allow laptops on planes, so you can take your laptop.
What an arcane 20th century concept, a laptop.
He has a tablet
Yeah,
or in tablet.
I was
Or-
gonna
or an
say
implant.
pen and a pencil.
there is that too.
Um,
So anyway, that's it. I mean, yeah, we got about 6 weeks to get it sort of done, and that should be easily done, so,
okay.
go
You-
team.
So when you say wait, are you?
I just said go team, did I not?
So follow up with your liaison departments. You have a report from the school committee?
I do, but I didn't bring my notes, but I can summarize them. The elementary school is gonna come in around 2.5%, it looks very likely. They don't have any really large capital plans for this year, but there is this bogey hanging out about the sprinkler system that needs to be assessed in terms of whether it's actually required. And I think I don't know that this applies to the library in the same way, but the school needs a sprinkler system if you think it does, kind of. It's not clear that there's a state mandate to have one because the building was built before they were required, but it's a big number if they do need it. And I guess they're working with Chief Pauly and whatever to figure out whether they in fact do really need to have that sprinkler system installed, and if they do, look for it, you know. Last year, what we did with the capital planning in the report was to sort of amortize all of the potential capital projects over a number of years and say, on average, it looks like this and this and this. This year's gonna be relatively small. I met with Tom Conrad this morning. The region budget, let me see if I can quote him fairly. They're getting to 2.5%, I think. I think they are cutting it down. They've got, without getting into great detail, there's retirements and whatever. There's always sort of finagling on the school budgets to get them right, you know, to get them to where you'd like them to be. And it looks like they'll be pretty good.
Is the elementary schools done with theirs already?
Done with,
Their budget.
pretty much, yeah. It hasn't changed in the last 3-4 weeks, and
So
it's
it's
at
the regional
2.5%.
budget that they're
Right.
throwing this thing out. there.
Correct,
That's the
yeah,
one that's-
that's
that's the one
the
that
regional
always
budget is still
generate.
being hashed out,
That's
but it
all
looks
that's
like it's
right.
gonna be pretty much in line. And there's nothing new yet on the real number for the capital improvement. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One is they haven't finished the process, but another is, part of their mandate, as I understand it, is to try to imagine the school of the future. And so what is this school? It's not just putting up a new building,
Yeah,
you know, it's like,
virtual.
will kids be learning
Gonna-
virtually? And-
Virtually, yeah.
but what Tom did say is they have done a study Cape-wide of the expected increase or decrease in the student population for the next 20 years, and it's flat to slightly negative. So they don't envision a influx of new students. So if you're going to build a sort of campus facility for education, you may need to think about more creative ways to get people onto that campus, and beyond poaching students from other parts of the region.
Or
Maybe
just cut-
expanding the region
Or
is,
just cut back on expenses.
well, there's always that.
So, did he Fred mention that Nauset is sort of the school that everybody wants to go to on the Cape? I mean, it would seem, from what I understand, Nauset is, there's school choice, and Nauset has to cut off their number of students at something, but it seems like there's an awful lot of people who want to go to Nauset, so they could expand.
I think that's generically true. There are pockets of resistance to that, as I understand it,
Okay.
here and there, some of which may go away in the next few years, and I don't want to be explicit about that,
Oh.
because there's, you know, because we're on, you know.
Oh, okay, I'm just asking, I don't
Well,
know.
they also recruit a certain number of students from outside the US,
Okay.
so. I mean,
Yeah.
I think what you can imagine is that there'll be programmatic ways to increase the school population going forward.
But it's not gonna be a huge increase.
Right, right.
Okay.
But for this year,
Things look,
they should slide through.
okay. Any other liaison reports? We still have not heard from the DPW head about attending our next meeting. We were hoping to get him to this one, but we haven't heard from him, so
Yeah, I had him on the list for this one.
yeah, but he hasn't responded to us, so.
How come you want him on the next one?
Well, I'm thinking I may need to go visit him in person since he won't respond to our repeated requests. Any thoughts?
You know the address?
I'll call him.
Get him on the phone right now.
I was thinking I might just go visit him tomorrow morning with a handwritten invitation.
There you go.
His budget looked fine to me.
Yeah.
Well,
I just-
yeah, but I would just like
Year
him
after
to
year.
respond to the invitation.
He and I are meeting tomorrow morning, I will follow up with him.
Okay, so I don't need to go see
No.
him.
You could go outside and hang out.
I can go hang, I can go camp in front of his office. I'd just as soon be spared that, thank you.
in there.
Has Paul's position
And
been
also the
filled?
harbor master hasn't responded to us,
Okay.
so we
I'll
want
follow up
him
with
at
him
the
too.
meeting next week also.
Yep.
All right, does anybody, there's no correspondence. Does anybody have,
OB,
any requests
I have.
for anything that needs to happen in the next two agendas, either next week's meeting or the 13th of February?
I just have a question about the town audit report.
Yeah,
Anyone spent chapter 90 funds?
Did I?
we touched on that
You
last
guys did,
meeting.
okay.
I
Um,
mean,
They
That's
have to be,
everything.
yeah, the DPW's been holding onto those two specifically to deal with the Lieutenant Island Road project. So
Okay.
they're It's under control.
Oh, let me just say, January 30th, right here in Wellfleet, in the Great Pond Room, there's going to be a Nauset High School Building Project Forum. They're doing a road show to like inform people about where the
Where the
capital
process
project
is
is.
at.
And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I don't know if we want to have, I don't think we need to have Mary Beth come in because that budget seems pretty locked down. And whether you want Tom to come in was sort of left open at the meeting today. But the main thing I would think would be to talk about the potential size and proximity of the capital project. So you can get information on that next week, right here.
What time is it?
It's at
It starts at 6.
So
6
so
p.m.
you can
Hour
attend the
before.
first hour
6
before
p.m.
coming in
Oh,
here.
are we, okay.
So you can inform yourself there and talk to Tom offline if you want and whatever, I guess, and then we might not have him, actually have him come in here just to tell us what they've already told us.
Well, I don't know that we need to have him come in to tell us about the capital project on which nothing has been decided yet.
Correct.
I would,
Couldn't agree more.
I might wanna see, we might wanna see him about the budget when
She
that
takes all the
gets
fun
ready.
out
It's gonna be reflected in this strategic plan, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It was last year.
When it gets to the next phase of the project, I think we will certainly wanna have him in, but I think this year it's probably not gonna be very helpful,
Now, when are they gonna request funding? Next year?
possibly.
Yeah,
That's when we want to talk about.
I wish.
This year we could just save
I
ourselves
wish
some
I were
time.
smarter about the
Exactly.
process, but it's between, the state has a lot of hurdles to jump over before you can get to the point where they even start to entertain funding, so they're still jumping through hurdles.
That can be dealt with by next year's chair.
Right.
So,
Well, the vice is.
It doesn't
does anybody, so is there any other business that anybody wants to address? Dan, do you have anything else for us? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Any,
Second?
Okay.
all those
So
in favor?
wait, yay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good meeting.